Alright, so we've drawn our portrait. We are making a Chuck Close inspired portrait. So the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to erase our guidelines for where our features of our face go. Hopefully you have used light enough pencil lines that you can erase them easily without a whole lot of effort needed. That's a skill we've been working on, using light pencil lines, so hopefully yours are light enough that you can erase them fairly easily. Okay, so I have my portrait. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a grid on top of my portrait. If you remember from our reading and watching the video on Chuck Close, you'll remember that he works in what is called a grid. And we need to draw a grid on top of our portrait so we can make it more like what Chuck Close does, okay? So I'm going to come down to the bottom of my paper. It really doesn't matter if you start at the bottom or the top, but I'm going to come to the bottom of my paper, and I have my ruler. I'm going to put my ruler at the start mark. Okay, my ruler has an extra area here before it's the 0 for my inches. I need to put that 0 line on the edge of my paper because this is actually where the ruler starts to get to that 1 inch mark, because I want to make a 1 by 1 inch grid. So I'm going to put this down here on the bottom of my paper. My paper is 9 inches long. So I'm going to put a small mark at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so I'll have 8 little marks along the bottom edge of my paper. Now I'm going to go up towards the middle, and I'm going to do the same exact thing again. I'm going to line up that 0 with my 9. Now some of my rulers in my classroom do not have that 0. It will have the start mark, but it will not be labeled as 0. Okay, so your ruler that you have in front of you might not have a 0 if you are using one of my rulers. Okay, but it's still basically the same thing. Okay, so I did that in the middle. Now I'm going to go up to the top of my paper. I'm going to do the same thing again for a third time. Now when I'm measuring things and I need to draw a line, this is how I do it. If my paper is small, sometimes I just do the top and the bottom, but generally speaking, I do it 3 times, once at the top, once at the middle, and once at the bottom, so that way I have 3 different areas to line up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up those dots from top to bottom. Now I always start on my left hand side, just like we read left to right. I line up those 3 marks at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom, and then using a light pencil line, I draw through them. Then I line up the next set of dots. If I try to start in the middle, I might get my dots confused and I might not end up with 1 inch lines apart. I'll draw my next line, and the next line. Now I can do this fairly quickly and fairly accurately because I've spent quite a bit of time using this method to draw lines. Whenever I have to draw lines and I need them to be a specific length apart or a specific length, this is how I do it. I'm fairly adept at using this method. You might find yourself that you need to take more time to get this lined up this way, but it is probably, as long as I'm measuring correctly, the most foolproof way I've found for us to be able to draw lines. And here's my last one. And when I'm done, I should have 9 sections. My paper should be divided into 9 vertical sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because my paper is 9 inches in length. Alright, now I'm going to turn my paper so it goes landscape or horizontally. I'm going to do the same exact thing again. I'm going to line up my edge of my paper with 0, the bottom. This is 12 inches. It's a 9 by 12 inch piece of paper. So it goes from the start and the end point of the ruler. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay? Then I will go again to about the middle. Line it up. Make my marks at every inch. If I'm not consistent with making marks at every inch, I will probably not have lines that are 1 inch apart. And then I will not have a 1-by-1 grid, which is what I want. I want to make what looks like a bunch of squares all right next to each other. So it's important that I take my time and I do it correctly, so that way my grid is nice and even. I'm almost done here. 8, 9, 10, and 11. Again, I will line my ruler up. It doesn't really matter which edge of the paper you start with, but I'll line my ruler up, 3 dots, and draw my line lightly to divide it. Line up, 3 dots, lightly to divide it. Line up, 3 dots, lightly to divide it. Line up, 3 dots, light pencil line. To achieve a light pencil line, do not apply a bunch of pressure to the pencil itself. The harder you press down on the pencil, the darker the line you're going to get. It takes practice to be able to draw lightly, so we should be practicing every chance we get so that way we can erase things easily. Alright, almost done here. One more line. Alright, now my portrait is gridded. It has a 1-by-1 inch grid from top to bottom. I measured 3 times for each line to make sure that I had an even line drawn. I used light pencil lines to make erasing easier, and I'm ready to start coloring in using the Chuck Close inspired method.